I'm the only sitting female MP in Parliament ever that's had a regular military background, and I sit on the Defence Select Committee, and for a short period under Prime Minister Liz Truss I was a Defence Minister for Defence People and Veterans. So obviously I've got a vested interest in our service personnel and defence in general. So these were the eyes that I was coming with to look at what's going on in Taiwan, given what's happening in the Indo-Pacific. And I need to make it clear that I'm not speaking for the government, I'm speaking as a parliamentarian backbencher. So it's my opinions I'm giving you now, but you know, you're a country living under threat. You're a country that has got strong democracy and a strong right to self-determination, and you're constantly living under this shadow with this date of 2027 being bandied around. And quite frankly, I can't get over how calm you all are. But behind the scenes, I know your politicians are working very hard to look at mitigation and what preparation they need to be doing just in case. So that's been a common theme that we've spoken about throughout. And of course, we've had our integrated review refresh in the UK, and whereas 2 years ago to the UK, China, you know, we had a watching brief on China, but we were working with China. 2 years later, China is a systemic partner. We need to keep a much more watching brief on, and there's now investment going in to Whitehall to look at the UK-China situation. So, you know, China's a concern for all of us, but no more so than you. And of course, we've been looking at trade and the potential for defence procurement and trade, and I know that you work closely with the Americans, and I would not be surprised if we see over the next few years closer military ties with the UK. But as I say, that's my opinion.
We heard about the submarine parts which had been sold from the UK to Taiwan in 2022. It was a significant amount of trade, and much more than in previous years. So it appears that, you know, what you were saying might already have started. Can you tell me, you know, why is it in the UK's security interests to support Taiwan?
Well, we've got freedom of navigation on what you saw the last few years with the Carrier Strike Group, which was, you know, an international representation of the freedom of navigation, the freedom of democracy, the freedom of your right to decide your futures, and the backing that the rest of the world were trying to show Taiwan and the other nations in the Indo-Pacific and the South China Sea, that, you know, this is something that we take quite seriously. And, you know, defence and defence procurement and defence equipment is a global industry, and it's an industry that doesn't move very quickly. So you have to plan, and we certainly do in the UK. We plan 5, 10, 15, even 20 years ahead. Taiwan, you might not have that time. So you need to be planning quickly, and you need the support from your allies and partners to do that.
So Rishi Sunak had described China in the refresh, in the integrated review refresh, as an epoch-defining challenge. What does that mean practically for the UK?
Well, I don't know what that means to Rishi, but it certainly means for me in my work in the UK that we need to keep, you know, China hawks. We need to keep a watching brief on what's happening across the Indo-Pacific. And that's not just about defence, that's about trade, that's about cyber security, that's about human rights, that's, you know, that's a whole gambit of issues that we need to keep a watching brief on. And it's a very dynamic, complex situation. But as I mentioned before, you know, I've come here because I want to see and listen and understand how you feel, how you know, the people feel, how your politicians feel, because we read briefs from people, you know, all over the country who watch and try and tell us what's going on. But it's really good that we're here, and, you know, you've hosted us so well, because it's, you know, it's your lived experience that we need to know about, and then we can take that back to the UK Parliament.
We have recently in Taiwan extended conscription sort of military service from 4 months to 1 year. That went up in January. how would the UK see that sort of move? Is that enough?
I'm interested. I did ask the question about whether they were considering women in conscription. I got a vague response, I have to say. I didn't get a definite yes or no, but that's not surprising. But I got a lot of talk about how they're promoting women in the military, because that's something I do at home. My main focus of work in Parliament is to promote women in the defence industry. That includes women in the defence procurement, and also the military, and also to support our veterans. So if you ask my opinion, should women who are eligible be conscripted? Yes, they should be, because, you know, we want equality, and this is true equality.
Tell me more about, I understand that you have written a report into women in the military. Tell me, you know, what were the conclusions of that report, and what recommendations, other recommendations, can you make to Taiwan, perhaps, you know, given that it will be a culture change for this country?
So I was asked by the Defence Select Committee to look at why recruitment targets hadn't been met for consecutive years, and why women have been overrepresented in the complaint system. So I undertook an inquiry. I got agreement from the Secretary of State for Defence to speak to serving personnel, because under Armed Forces rules, you're not allowed to do that. And in a 2-week window, I had nearly 10% of serving personnel, women, contact me with their experiences. And what they told us is 9 out of 10 women would recommend a career in the military, as I would. I was in the Cold War. I was in the intelligence corps way back in the 80s, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's certainly given me lessons and experiences to carry through all my life. And now at the age of 55, I'm in Parliament, still using those skills, still 5 minutes early, still with my shoes polished. So these are skills that, you know, women learn in the military, and I'm here to promote women in the military. But what we also found was that it wasn't quite as equal as we thought. So, for example, equipment and body armour was made for men. So, of course, put that into a female form, and then you're in a firing position out in the field, and you suddenly realise that you're quite exposed. Why had they never thought of doing body armour for women? Why had they never thought of doing equipment, clothing, boots for women? It was simple things like that. You know, how do you go to the loo if you're in an armoured fighting vehicle and you're surrounded by men? No one had ever thought of these issues, and this is about equality. And they were the sort of the low-level things that we discussed, and the MOD have completely changed the way they look at women, and the way they treat women, and the way they provide for women, even so much so that they now provide wraparound childcare for serving women with children, because most married couples in the military, particularly the army, are dual serving. But we also found evidence of discrimination, harassment and bullying, and actually, you know, sexual assault to a lesser degree. And what the MOD have completely changed their way of reporting and complaining, because what we found was when a woman was complaining about behaviour by her male peers or superiors, there tended to be a lot of cover-up and marking your own homework.
And in the UK, there isn't conscription, it's voluntary. What percentage of the military is women?
12%, slightly higher in the RAF, slightly lower in the military, but on average 12%. The MOD have set ambitious targets or level of aspiration, as they keep reminding me it's not a target, 30% by 2030, and the RAF are looking at 40% women by 2030.
Wow, that's considerable jump, isn't it? And so by 2030, let's say if those targets are met, those aspirations are met, how would the military, UK's military, differ to what it is today?
I think it'll be more inclusive, more diverse. Women bring a different complementary skill set to men. I think it'll be a more modern establishment. The British military is one of our oldest male-dominated establishments. And I think if we're going to look forward, they want to recruit the best people. They don't want to positively recruit women. They would just want to make it equal for women, because I very much believe in a meritocracy. So the best person gets a job, whether that's male or female. We just need to make sure that the women are in the room when the interviews are going ahead. So it's going to make it more modern, more progressive as we move forward, and it's going to be more around AI, cyber, more technical, I suspect, going forward. I think, you know, we're going to need a different type of military, and we do have an army transformation programme running in the UK at the moment, actually looking at our military and how we move from the Cold War, which is what I was in, to a modern, high-tech military. And do we need the same numbers? What skill mix do we need? What capabilities and what skills we need? And of course, women are 50% of the population. In fact, might be just slightly more. You know, there's a whole cohort there that the military are missing out on recruitment.
Not harnessing. So you mentioned that you were in intelligence during the Cold War. Do you think that the world is currently in a Cold War?
I think the world is more insecure and vulnerable than it's ever been. Yes, I do. I think, you know, there are certainly more places now that you wouldn't travel to. So I would probably say we're in a different type of Cold War, but a Cold War it certainly is.
And one where it's a bipolar world between the US, would you say, and then maybe China and Russia on the other side?
I think it's probably bipolar, not by nation, but by democracy. So if you're a democracy, you might be on one side. If you're more dictatorial, you might be on another.
The UK has been, you know, one of the fastest nations one of the first nations to supply Ukraine with heavier weaponry. Will that continue in order to give Ukraine a victory?
Well, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has said there's nothing off the table, and it's a moving feast. It's dynamic, and I think what European allies, NATO members, and the world need to think about is, you know, will Putin stop there? What's the end game? What's the end game for Putin? Obviously, President Xi's been there at the moment. What's that going to say? What is the end game for the Ukrainian people? That might be different to the Ukrainian politicians. I think we just have to take every day as it comes. But they certainly need support because it's way into the second year now, and people will start to get tired. Morale is low. And I think nothing is off the table. They want jets. There's a lot of discussion in the UK now about jets, what type of jets, and the training. So the UK have started to train jet pilots. We'll see where that goes.
Is that on the F-16s?
Well, it's a sort of a basic, this is something that we've been trying to find out, what exactly are they training them on. A little bit evasive at the moment as to what exactly they're getting trained with. I think it's just the preliminary levels of their training. So we'll have to see. That's something we're watching as it materialises and trying to tease out the information from the MOD to get some direction of where they're really going. But certainly, you know, in my opinion, we should be giving Ukraine all the support because they're fighting a war on our behalf.
For democracy.
For democracy.
Sarah Atherton, thank you so much for joining Taiwan Talks today.
Thank you for inviting me.